I want to express my gratitude to my viewers who watched my presentation summarizing Chris Hedges' The Cost of Resistance. It received 510 views in 6 days and 15 comments. The feedback from my audience is helpful because it helps me to develop content that addresses your needs. Today I will be summarizing Trump's war on education. The original post can be found on the Chris Hedges report on Substack. The attacks on colleges and universities. Donald Trump's administration has warned some 60 colleges that they could lose federal money if they fail to make campuses safe for Jewish students, and is already pulling $400 million from Columbia University. This has nothing to do with fighting anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is being used as a smokescreen, a cover for a much broader and more insidious agenda. The goal, which includes plans to abolish the Department of Education and terminate all programs of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, is to turn the educational system from kindergarten through graduate school into an indoctrination machine. Totalitarian regimes seek absolute control over the institutions that reproduce ideas, especially the media and education. Narratives that change the myths used to legitimize absolute power, in our case, historical facts that blemish the sanctity of white male supremacy, capitalism, and Christian fundamentalism, are erased. There is to be no shared reality. There are to be no other legitimate perspectives. One of the most significant threats that a class hierarchy can face is a universally accessible and excellent public education system, writes Jason Stanley in Erasing History: How Fascists Rewrite the Past to Control the Future. The political philosophy that fuels this threat most acutely and unites hostility toward public education with support for class hierarchy is a certain form of right-wing libertarianism, an ideology that sees free markets as the wellspring of human freedom. These kinds of libertarians oppose government regulation and virtually all forms of public goods, including public education. The political goal of this version of libertarian ideology is to dismantle public goods. The dismantling of public education is backed by oligarchs and business elites alike, who see in democracy a threat to their power and the taxes required for public goods a threat to their wealth. Public schools are the foundational democratic public good. It is therefore perfectly logical that those who are opposed to democracy, including fascist and fascist-leaning movements, would join forces with right-wing libertarians in undermining the institution of public education. Chris Hedges taught Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States in a New Jersey prison classroom. Zinn's book is one of the primary targets of the far right. Zinn implodes the lies used to glorify the conquest of the Americas. He allows readers to see the United States through the lens of Native Americans, immigrants, the enslaved, women, union leaders, persecuted socialists, anarchists and communists, abolitionists, anti-war activists, civil rights leaders, and the poor. He holds up the testimonies of Sojourner Truth, Chief Joseph, Henry David Thoreau, Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, Randolph Bourne, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King Jr. As Hedges gave his lectures, he would hear his students mutter, "Damn," or "We've been lied to." Zinn makes clear that the organized militant forces opened up democratic space in American society. None of these democratic rights, the abolition of slavery, the right to strike, equality for women, Social Security, the 8-hour workday, were given to us by a benevolent ruling class. It involves struggle and self-sacrifice. Zinn, in short, explains how democracy works. Zinn's book was revered in Hedges' cramped prison classroom. It was revered because Hedges' students intimately understood how white privilege, racism, capitalism, poverty, police, the courts, and lies peddled by the powerful deform their communities and their lives. Zinn allowed them to hear for the first time the voices of their ancestors. He wrote history, not myth. He not only educated Hedges' students, but also empowered them. Zinn was fired for insubordination at Spelman College, a historically black institution. He served on the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He marched with his students demanding civil rights. Spelman's president was not amused. Education is meant to be subversive. It gives students the ability and the language to ask questions about reigning assumptions and ideas. It questions dogma and ideology. It can, as Zinn writes, counteract the deception that makes the government's force legitimate. It lifts up the voices of the marginalized and oppressed to honor a plurality of perspectives and experiences. This leads, when education works, to empathy and understanding, a desire to right historical wrongs, to make society better. It fosters the common good. Education is not only about knowledge, it is also about inspiration. It is about passion. It is about the belief that what we do in life matters. It is about, as James Baldwin writes in his essay, The Creative Process, the ability to drive to the heart of every answer and expose the question where the answer hides. The right-wing attacks on programs such as critical race theory, or DEI, as Stanley points out in his book, intentionally distort these programs to create the impression that those whose perspectives are finally included, like African Americans, for instance, are receiving some sort of illicit benefit or unfair advantage. And so they target black Americans who have risen to positions of power and influence and seek to delegitimize them as undeserving. The ultimate goal is to justify a takeover of the institutions, transforming them into weapons in the war against the very idea of multiracial democracy. The integrity and quality of public higher education in America has been under assault for decades, as Ellen Schrecker documents in her book, The Lost Promise: American Universities in the 1960s. The protests on college campuses in the 1960s, Schrecker points out, saw the enemies of the liberal academy attack its ideological and financial underpinnings. Close quote. Tuitions, once low, if not free, have soared, and with them, tremendous student debt. State legislators and the federal government have slashed funding to public universities, forcing them to seek support from corporations and reduce most faculty to the status of poorly paid adjuncts, often lacking benefits as well as job security. Nearly 75% of the instruction at colleges and universities is in the hands of adjuncts, part-time lecturers, and non-tenure track full-time faculty, who have no hope of being granted tenure, according to the American Federation of Teachers. Public institutions, which serve 80% of the nation's students, are chronically short of funding and basic resources. Higher education has evolved, even at major research universities, into vocational training, no longer a vehicle for learning, but economic mobility. The assault sees elite schools, where tuition can run over $80,000 a year, cater to the wealthy and to the privileged, locking out the poor and the working class. Totalitarian societies do not teach students how to think, but what to think. They churn out students who are historically and politically illiterate, blinded by an enforced historical amnesia. They seek to produce servants and apologists who conform, not critics and rebels. Liberal arts colleges, for this reason, do not exist in totalitarian states. PEN America has documented nearly 16,000 book bans in public schools nationwide since 2021. A number, PEN writes, not seen since the Red Scare McCarthy era of the 1950s. These books include titles such as The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, The Color Purple by Alice Walker, and Mouse, the graphic novel on the Holocaust by Art Spiegelman. The most important human activity, as Socrates and Plato remind us, is not action, but contemplation, echoing the wisdom enshrined in Eastern philosophy. We cannot change the world if we cannot understand it. By digesting and critiquing the philosophers and realities of the past, we become independent thinkers in the present. We are able to articulate our own values and beliefs, often in opposition to what those ancient philosophers advocated. a capacity to think, to ask the right questions, however, is a threat to totalitarian regimes seeking to inculcate a blind obedience to authority. Hannah Arendt writes in The Origins of Totalitarianism, the force possessed by the totalitarian propaganda, before the movements have the power to drop iron curtains to prevent anyone's disturbing, by the slightest reality, the gruesome quiet of an entirely imaginary world, lies in the ability to shut the masses off from the real world. As bad as things are, they are about to get much worse. The nation's educational system is being dragged into the slaughterhouse where it will be dismembered and privatized. The corporations profiting from the charter school system and online colleges, whose primary concern is certainly not with education, replace real teachers with non-unionized, poorly trained instructors. Students, rather than being educated, will be taught by rote and fed the familiar tropes of totalitarian playbooks. Paeans to white supremacy, national purity, patriarchy, and the nation's duty to impose its virtues, quote unquote, on others by force. The mass indoctrination will not only ensure ignorance, but obedience. And that is the point. And this has been a summary of Trump's war on education from the Chris Hedges report. I look forward to your questions and comments.